the chat feature to offer comment or to ask questions, because they won't be monitored and your comment or question will go unnoticed. When it's the appropriate time to talk, when you're acknowledged by the chair, you can unmute and have the floor. Finally, a roll call the Board of Supervisors. Oh, excuse me. I'd also like to ask that board members indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes can accurately reflect the action taken. Now I'll call for a roll of the board to ensure that everyone can hear and interact using the Zoom telemeeting platform. Please indicate you're here when your name is called. Ms. Danini?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Mitra?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. So first up, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and Dave is going to shoot a screen, there it is, of the flag. Wow. And we can all just rise and say the pledge. And this is the first time we're doing it in this kind of meeting format orders. So folks can join in if they want to. All right, so let's rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Next up, citizens input for items that are not on the agenda, and we just ask that you say your name and your township of residence, please. Any item?
I guess.
There you go.
I guess I do, sort of. I'm not sure exactly what's on the agenda, but I do want to once again emphasize that my name's Rhonda Stern. I live on North Butt Street, and that our intersection, I'm not asking for anything to be done right now. I'm just sort of bringing it to the attention that our intersection of Butt Street and College Avenue has some dangers to it. So as development is looked at right on those corners, I want to reinforce that as soon as people leave that 25-mile-an-hour, on College Avenue and they get to the old house property, they zoom up. I mean, they go fast. And so as we start thinking about more traffic and more buildings, I want to just emphasize that our intersection there needs some protection. Also, as development happens, the parking on Butt Street, we fought pretty hard to keep it a 2-hour parking so it wouldn't just be filled with cars, because also when people park there, it gets a little dangerous at that intersection again. So we're going to have to look at parking, especially if, I don't know if that beer pub is going to be coming or not, but it's a constant ongoing thing, and we tend not to call on people that have parked there for 2 days, for example, which does happen. If they leave at the end of the weekend, or if it doesn't, happen that there's 5 cars there. But I know the police aren't comfortable giving tickets there because, who wants to go every 2 hours and see if somebody's been there more than 2 hours? It's not their favorite thing, I've been told. So that's another thing we're going to have to look at as development happens in our little part of the world there, is how to keep that road passable and safe, as well as that intersection safe. So the only other thing I think is just a repeat of last time, that as you're looking at whether or not to build the apartment building on the corner of Buckout and College Avenue, that does close down options for other possible healthy ways to enter into State College. Maybe it's good that it slows down traffic as it goes around that right-hand bend and that sharp bend, but it is something to think about. So those are my 2 concerns about my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate you bringing those concerns to our attention. And I'll just say that we as a board did talk a little bit about that area generally. I believe that was at our last meeting. We call it the TSD zoning district there. And we talked about sending that to the Planning Commission for them to have discussions about these kinds of things that you're talking about, parking, safety, the kind of neighborhood we want to create, that sort of thing. So Dave, you probably know a lot better than I do about when that dialogue would be happening at the Planning Commission, but I would just urge residents to stay involved and bring these things to our attention, because people who live there and have businesses there are really who can, help us understand what goes on there and how we can best address things with the tools we have. So I'm not sure if they started those discussions yet or not, but you can sign up for their agendas and get them emailed to you. And so, okay, any other comments during our citizen input period? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the April 19th regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors.
So moved.
I
Sorry.
move that we approve the April 19th minutes of the Board of Supervisors.
Presented second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Laura, I just had a
Oh.
comment
Oh, yeah.
about the minutes.
Oh, sure.
It said on the minutes that there was no citizen input from our last meeting, but we did have input from someone named Thomas Adams, and he spoke about his concerns at the Baileyville Center.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Dave, do we need a motion to make that change, or can you just?
I can add it in if
Okay.
you wanted to make a motion to amend the minutes to
Okay.
add Mr. Adams' comments. We'll add them in
Okay.
then.
All right, we'll take that as
I'm
Patty
moving
moving to
amendment.
amend. Yeah, great. Do we have a second?
This
Second.
is Lisa, I'll second.
Okay. Let's see. All in favor of the amended minutes?
Aye.
Approval of the
Aye.
amended minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to our special reports. First up, we have Dave Probalka, Township Manager, with our COVID-19 coronavirus response report.
Thank you again, and good evening, everybody. My report is very short this evening. There haven't been many developments since our last meeting, which is generally a good thing. As always, there can be more information found on any local or regional items related to the pandemic by visiting the Center Region Ready Facebook page or the Center Region COG website at crcog.net, as well as, of course, the township's website and the Borough State College website. The Centers for Disease Control released a new guidance for fully vaccinated people, went into effect on April 27th. Revised guidelines permit fully vaccinated people to visit others indoors without masking or physical distancing. Vaccinated individuals may visit with unvaccinated individuals from a single household who are at low risk for severe infection without wearing masks or physical distancing. Participating in outdoor activities and recreation without a mask, except in certain crowded settings and venues, is permitted. Resuming domestic and international travel without being tested prior to self-quarantining, prior to or self-quarantine, excuse me, let me repeat this again. Without being domestic or international travel without being tested prior to traveling, or self-quarantining after travel is now permitted for fully vaccinated people. Refraining from testing following a known exposure if asymptomatic and subject to certain exceptions. Refraining from quarantining following a known exposure if asymptomatic, and refraining from routine screening testing if asymptomatic and feasible. So, of course, all of this can be found on the Centers for Disease Control website by visiting cdc.gov. There are still other restrictions and requirements that remain in place even for fully vaccinated individuals, such as wearing a mask when indoors in crowded settings. Countywide, there have been 16,411 confirmed cases, which represents an increase of 677 from my last report. 68,091 negative cases have been reported in Center County through the Pennsylvania COVID-19 dashboard. In Pennsylvania, the confirmed number of cases reached 975,044. and an additional 183,442 probable cases with 26,276 deaths. More information on local conditions and response efforts, again, can be found at the State College Borough and Ferguson Township websites. Once again, I want to thank everyone for your patience and understanding as we recover from this crisis. I can answer any questions that the board may have.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions? Steve?
Dave, I don't remember how we wrote our ordinance for the COVID masking and social distancing. Does that automatically change when the state guidance changes, or do we need to then go in and revisit it when the state changes guidance?
Yeah, so really, it's a good question. The ordinance is not entirely congruent with the relaxed guidelines or guidance that the CDC released on April 27th, because we still have provisions that require masking at all times. For example, indoors, we don't distinguish between vaccinated or unvaccinated individuals. So that warrants an additional look, and I'll bring that back to the board to see if there's any further amendments that you might be interested in making. Up until the guidance that was released last week, I hadn't intended on presenting any amendments or seeing if there was any amendments to the emergency ordinance just yet, even though in certain applications, our ordinance was indeed more restrictive than Department of Health guidelines. Most notably is the restriction that we have on outdoor gathering sizes. So our ordinance remains at 50, whereas I believe that the state guidance was increased to 100 that were permitted to congregate outdoors. So, because of the conditions locally, I would strongly encourage that restriction remain in place as is. But these additional guidelines like that are applicable to vaccinated individuals, perhaps we may want to look at the ordinance again and see if we need to make if the board's interested in making any modifications to reflect those conditions, because there are there is some disparity between what that most recent guidance permits from the CDC and what our ordinance would enable. So I'll take a look at that and then have it up on the agenda for May 17th for discussion by the board.
Thanks, Dave. Good question, Steve. Lisa?
Dave, the one other thing that we could possibly look at is what the other municipalities are doing, because our ordinance had been not, totally the same as the other municipalities, but was, fairly consistent. So if we can see what they're doing as well, when we look at it again, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. The borough's considering some modifications tonight. Patton Township and College Township have already affected changes. I don't know whether they're going to look at them again more carefully now because this guidance kind of took a lot of us by surprise from the CDC in a good way, a pleasant surprise, but one that we may have to be ready to make some modifications. So I think really if State College Borough enacts their amendments, of the four of us in the center region, Harrison Half Moon notwithstanding, we would be the only municipalities not made any changes to our ordinance, given those more relaxed standards from the Department of Health. So I'll be ready to talk about those. I'll present it back to you on May 17th, and then whatever changes you feel are appropriate, we'll work them in.
Sounds great. All right. Let's move on to, thank you, Dave. Let's move on to our next report. Bill Keogh with our Center Region Park and Recreation Authority report.
Bill, I don't need to, oh, you're good. Okay, I just want
Thank you. Bill Keogh here, representative appointed by Ferguson Township to the Center Region Park and Recreation Authority. Start off with some brief comments regarding the Whitehall Road Regional Park. As you know, we are looking at 3 different rephasing options in terms of trying to align budget constraints and amenities at the park, and that is going on. Stahl Schaefer is the engineering firm that is doing that. It is the thought that at our joint meeting on the 13th of May, that's a joint meeting between the Park Authority and the Capital Parks Committee from COG, it's the target that there will be data from the study that Stahl-Schaefer is doing presented at that time to those two bodies at the same time. I haven't seen it yet. It's not finished yet, but the target date is the 13th of May for that report to be initially laid out to the Parks Capital Committee and the Center Region Park and Recreation Authority. Stahl-Schaefer is working on that as we speak in terms of the three options and the financial and engineering implications of each of those options. Because it's been asked on several fronts, I want to give you a few statistics with regard to rectangular fields. Because Whitehall Road Park up front is aiming toward the type of amenity that calls for rectangular fields as opposed to diamond type fields, which is typically baseball and softball. The rectangular fields are aimed at soccer and lacrosse, flag football, that kind of thing. And the current anticipated 2021, the number of teams needing to utilize rectangular fields appears at the moment to be 69. 69 teams that we're aware of locally. Now, this isn't weekend tournament ball or any of that stuff. This is our local teams. There are 30 in center soccer, 8 in the Celtics soccer program, 8 teams in the State College Warriors lacrosse program, 8 teams in the State College Lions flag football program, and 15 teams in the Center Region flag football team, coming up to a total of 69 teams that we're anticipating this summer, fall to be utilizing rectangular fields. On the flip side of things, currently we have 5 fields in our parks that are dedicated primarily to rectangular fields. We have 3 at Fogelman, 1 at Circleville, and 1 at Homestead. Now, in addition to that, for example, out at Whitehall, at Fairbrook Park, we have a large open field that we modify for several different opportunities at utilizing, and it's primarily a soccer group, the soccer field. But in terms of dedicated rectangular fields for these 69 teams, we basically have 5. If you were to take, just for mathematical purposes, 69 teams at 12 local area participants per team, that would come up to a figure of 828 users, just in what we have scheduled. What ends up happening, and I've mentioned this before, because the demand so outweighs the outdistances the availability, what we end up doing is taking a number of our diamond-shaped fields and setting them up, laying them out in the outfield to be able to do the rectangular field type sports. And while on one side of the coin, one would say, well, gee, that's smart. I mean, why would we have to make extra fields when we've got these diamond-shaped fields and we can make the outfields work for rectangular fields? But when you think about the life of a field, especially if it's a grass field, you've got to account for rest time of that turf. And if you don't count for rest time, what you end up having is a field deterioration that at a further point in time is going to require a significant amount of investment and may have to go down for a while to recover. And so that's a battle that we fight constantly with regard to our fields and local demand. It's not an unfixable demand or battle, but it certainly is something that lots of times people don't think about. The fact our outfields, for example, in many of our diamond sports are used through 3 seasons. And that's spring season, summer season, fall season. Between diamond sports and rectangular sports, and the winter season is not considered a recovery season because of the nature of our weather. So the winter season, when we're not using it, is not a recovery period for these fields, and that needs to be taken into consideration. I just mentioned those things because some people have asked the question about some of these fields and the numbers and how we work things. In addition, all COVID-19 protocols that we have been utilizing during this period are still in effect for our park and recreation program throughout the region. You guys mentioned this just a little earlier. We're starting now to get variations between the townships in terms of, well, at this park, because it's in this township, we have to follow this kind of, this level of COVID response, but another park in another township, we may not have to follow. That clearly starts sending mixed messages to our users who don't think about municipal boundaries when they want to go to a park. They,
True.
in fact, a number you wouldn't know.
Thank you, Bill, so much. I'm sure that's a real challenge. A lot of folks aren't even sure what municipality they live in. So, I'm going to open it up to any questions for Bill from the board. Okay, Bill, I have just a few questions. I appreciate the information that you gave us on the soccer field demand. I know one thing I was interested in when I first started learning about how we here in the Center region approach recreation provisions, which, you know, it really differs from community to community, like where I'm from in Harrisburg, like also, you know, divided into townships around it, really have a different way that they provide recreation. Everybody's way is very different. Here we have a lot of sports teams that are not really part of Center Region Park and Recreation, right? But we provide the amenities that those clubs utilize. And that's kind of how we do it around here. So I know there's a lot of teams that rely on our assets. And one thing I've said is that I think that it's difficult for the municipalities to understand that and how that works, and how we who actually invest in the capital of parks need to hear those things, but frequently don't, because maybe the authority is hearing them instead. So when the comprehensive plan came out, I was really enthusiastic about seeing some of the inventories, which I will say do differ from the numbers that you're bringing up. And it's also really the driver of why I've been wondering ever since I figured that out, been wondering, how can we increase our revenue provision for Center Region Park and Rec in a way that's okay with our residents, right? Add more pavilions. There's pavilion rentals. We as supervisors, a lot of times we're very out of touch with that. We don't get that data. So I've been asking for that kind of data. So what I'm getting back to the sports fields, the Fairbrook Park soccer field They rent that out all the time. I know you're saying it's not really a soccer field. It is the best not soccer field I have ever seen. We added parking for that non-soccer field. It's really good. But they do store their goals over the winter in the baseball amenity there. So I do see there's some overlap there. But really, my point is, it's very important for there to be more exploration of the amenity needs with the boards of supervisors, because we're the ones that invest capitally in most of the parks, not the regional parks, you know, right? So I'm kind of on my soapbox here, but it's just when we do get to talk body to body, it's so rare that I always want to take the opportunity. So I don't know. I guess I'm saying thank you for that. Let's look more at that data because, you know, we've heard pickleball. Us supervisors barely know about that, but I've been to the authority meetings and that's a hot topic there, right? It's a thing. So Lisa, your hand is up. Sorry, I'm officially getting off my soapbox now. Lisa.
Thanks. Well, just in kind of going along with what you're saying about knowing the field needs, and then also by team, you know, by activity, but then also in terms of rest, like resting the fields. I think this is important information to get back to our parks committee and, you know, for us to be familiar with when we're looking at the capital improvement plan. You know, I think this is just important information that I'm not sure we're familiar enough with, you know, and then to go down that road just a little bit with what Bill was saying. I think another thing to take into consideration along with that count of teams would be, you know, what seasons are they all playing in? How many are playing in opposite seasons and how many are playing year round? So I think that might be another good data point to look at when we're trying to evaluate what we need. And I think what we're getting at here is that the three options for rephasing are going to have, you know, either 3 or 4 fields, something like that. I think maybe that's part of this, is that we need to say, can we do with just 3 additional fields? Or I think that'll be part of that decision making. Maybe, I'm not really sure. So I guess my question too is then what's the decision making timeline we're looking at here? If there's going to be a joint meeting in May, do we need to be discussing May 13th? Do we need to be discussing this as a board at our next board meeting so that we understand what options there are before general forum at the end of the month? Are we going to be expected to make a decision? So I guess that would be a question. And then I was just wondering if there was any update on the Active Adult Center. I hadn't heard what's going on out there. So totally separate topic, but so those were my 2 questions.
Thank you, Lisa. I can do the Active Adult Center really quickly. I have that in my report. The Active Adult Center is still open 2 days a week. 1 day a week is for in-person activities, and 1 day a week is for an outing for the group. And staff is keeping in touch with the people who were using it. Everybody is just can't wait until the opportunity to open up full time, but at least we're providing some services now through the Active Adult Center in being open 1 day for in-person and another day where they go on an outing somewhere. The questions, you know, I've heard this question about teams and in leagues and so on before. And one of the questions that has come up, Laura, with regard to, well, how many teams are teams that are part of the recreation, park and recreation program versus other league sponsoring groups? And one of the things that I think about quickly is that we don't have and aren't projected to have the league management staff in order to run all of these things. We're relying on the community and those individual leagues to have their own management structure. Most of them do. Most of them have their leadership opportunities. I'm sure they'd love to give them to the Park and Recreation Department because we know that managing some of these things requires a handful of hours and skills, but we don't have the staff to do that. Now,
I know we
that's
could
a
probably
different
talk about this kind of a philosophy for quite some time, and it would involve benchmarking different kinds of things and assessing costs and all kinds of stuff. And I don't necessarily agree or disagree. I was just kind of just saying that because of how it is, whether it should be that way or not really making a statement on about it, but because of that, and then the added layer of authority cog, but the municipalities do the capital investment, you have all these places where in the dialogue, information is lost, not conveyed. And so that's why, you know, we started the Parks Committee. You're a bridge to that. We're a bridge with you, so on and so forth. But we still just don't have the same kind of direct communication with our residents about recreation that some communities do. That's all I'm saying. So that's why that comp plan was really important. It gave us some data. We probably should look at it more, but I'm glad we'll have this meeting. Lisa, you asked a timeline question. So we can, I think, I don't know if we need, if we need to have a conversation, we can at the next meeting. I don't know if we do or not, but if folks feel we do, we can. My understanding is, well, I don't know. I guess I don't know how the question's going to be asked. Maybe Steve.
I guess there are two, from my vantage point, there appear to be two questions on the table that the municipalities through COG, et cetera, are going to be asked to deal with. One of those questions is what the funding mechanism is going to look like, the loan. And there are several iterations out there of the loan and the municipality's obligations related to whatever the loan is in terms of refinancing that. Then there's the other question about once we establish the loan, there are at the moment 3 options out there in terms of what amenities will be included based on whatever that loan issue is, however it's resolved. And Ferguson has made its position known, as have most of the other municipalities, clearly that the restroom question needs to be on the table and not a debatable issue. So once the money is figured out, then we've got to go back and look at the 3 options that Stahl-Schaefer is looking at to see how much we can do with whatever the money allocation ends up being. So I guess, you know, there are those 2 issues that you as a municipality have to ultimately weigh in on. The first being, however, what the money is, what the loan is going to look like, how it's going to be refinanced, and how it's going to be configured.
Yeah, well, right. Thank you.
And the question then becomes, which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks, Bill. But I guess the question is it going to be like, are we going to have a dialogue in general forum about this question, which is really a general forum question, and then break into our unit? It's like same as before. But we can figure this out. I think we can figure this out later. We'll have it on the agenda if we should and if we don't need to, we won't. But I agree with Bill that the authority has selected certain options for Stahl-Schaefer to look at, and they're going to come back with numbers. It's new to me information that they're going to come back with numbers at the Parks Capital meeting. Folks can certainly come to that too. So I guess that's going to be happening next Thursday.
That'll be the first that's the planned first unveiling
Cool.
of the Stahl Schaefer engineering review. Yes, next Thursday.
Thanks. Okay.
One
So
last,
that'll give us
one
more
last-
information. And then,
Yes.
yeah, yep. And then I understand what your point was, Bill, about giving the number of fields that you are saying are in use. I've seen it counted differently, but it is a question this board has had. And I think it's important question that above and beyond Whitehall Road Regional Park, we need to have
absolutely.
different communication and flow of information and coordinated planning on our park and recreation provisions, because that will just benefit everybody. So thank you so much for your efforts on it.
I think one last comment. You all should have received in the mail our spring summer active guide of programming that is being laid out to the region from the Park and Recreation Department. And I've got to say to you that I am impressed with the variety, with the range of potential users, and the attempt in general to provide this region with all kinds of options, given especially the number of staff that we have available. And it is my opinion, and this is only an opinion, but to you, that our bang for the buck appears to be something that, while Laura is suggesting that we look at it and find out a little more closely what that bang for the buck is, when you look at the programmatic end of things, clearly I think there are not many stones unturned in terms of options for our residents in the center region. And I'm pleased with that, and it certainly is reflected in the active guide.
Thank you so much, Bill, for pointing that out. I did receive my active guide and I kept it. I did not just immediately recycle it to look through it. So that's a good sign. It was attractive. Yeah, also,
One other quick thing, Laura. I hate to interrupt, but one other quick thing, because I think this is important. You know, we've talked about doing this electronically, and we've messed around with, do we do it electronically or don't? For this particular guide, we want the people to have it somewhere where they can get a hold of it for a period of time. And we were able to sell $1,412.50 worth of advertising in the guide to help defray costs.
That's
and
great.
I think that is something, and most of that is already lined up for, again, our fall distribution of our fall program.
That's great, Bill. I know you're a big proponent of those private-public partnerships that get the job done, and as am I. I do just want to jot back to, this is kind of becoming a really long report, but I do have to, for clarity's sake, and because of recent events, I just want to make sure that when I'm talking about bang for my buck, I think that you were saying it in a little bit different context than I was saying it. So specifically, very specifically, it took me a long time to realize that what we did as supervisors in one entity really had a huge effect on the ability of the authority to draw in revenue and therefore ensure the sustainable success of that entity. And what I'm saying is, because of that disconnect, I cannot do my job very well in that respect. I'm not talking about anybody else's bang for their buck. I'm talking about my bang for my buck. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's really how I'm looking at it, how Ferguson can best utilize our resources to support that. And if you look at the benchmarkings of the National Park and Rec Association, you know that, the ratio of revenue in tax dollars and fees is an important marker of success for a Park and Rec entity. So I just really want to ensure our success. So thank you so much, Bill, for your report and all your time that you spend in Park and Rec. And with that,
You're
let's
welcome.
move on to our first quarter financial report with Eric Anderson, Director of Finance. Sorry, Eric, we wrapped that up quickly. No surprise.
Okay, can you
All
guys see
right,
it?
thanks.
I'm assuming you can see that.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. My name is Eric Anderson. I'm the finance director for the township. I'd like to report on the first quarter results for the township ending March 31st. Let's review the funds that we're talking about tonight. Now, here we go. The slide describes the different funds and fund groups of the township. The general fund is the main fund of the township, generally making up over 50% of all the governmental fund transactions. The capital project funds are separated by use or type. Each fund has specific restrictions for use. There's a new fund in this year, Fund 20, the Stormwater Fund. That is going to be a special revenue fund as soon as the fee starts getting collected. That's why the asterisk is on there under the special. The special revenue funds include assessments or other revenue sources other than general taxes. That's why they're separated out from other funds. In the general obligation account, which is, we have one account. Some places have many. We just have the one for debt payments. This slide depicts the change in cash or the cash balances over the last 3 years by fund. It is essential, sufficient cash is essential to survival of an entity. Without adequate cash, the township cannot pursue opportunities or purchase quality goods. We basically stuck with the cheapest we could get, and that's not always a good place to be. Township needs cash to absorb the cost of growth as expenses rise before subsequent revenue streams, such as, you look at some of these student apartments, takes more police services, and we're not getting the money until they're completed, and it just takes a while. So far, 21 looks very favorable. It's too early to tell because it's only the first quarter what the end results will be, but the first quarter is, if any indication, it looks like this will be a decent year. You can see the general fund actually increased. That's not typical. Usually the first quarter, the general fund is actually a decrease. And the general obligation fund obviously is our debt or bond proceeds that we spent down. So that's why you went to 2020 at 6.8 million. Now we're down to 998, and it'll be down to zero shortly in the second quarter. Liquid fuels, we get decent money every year from the state. That has been decreasing though, but in total, township's looking healthy. Here's the revenue expenditures and the net for year to date for the last 3 years. Like I said, the general fund actually has a positive result on the far right first group. Capital projects, not all the money's been transferred from the general fund yet. We do an annual transfer to basically fund the different, because they do not collect any income other than money that's transferred into it from another fund. Special revenue, that's always good in the first quarter because of the money from the state for the liquid fuels. Debt service, as you can see, we spent a lot of the money that was already saved up. And in total, we're 1.5 million, which is not bad considering 2.1 million is from the debt service. Here's our tax revenue. As you can see, real estate tax was actually, we did transfer net $260,000 in March to from the tax office to the township for real estate taxes. We did collect a little bit of money in March. Typically it's April. Earned income tax was actually very good. 1.8, we got $800,000 in March from the real income taxes. And we also received $175,000 in transfer taxes in January, which also helped considerably. That's why that's exceedingly high relative to past years. Key receipts, not a whole lot, no grant money to speak of. We did receive $619,000 liquid fuel funding, but that actually decreased from 2020, which was a decrease from 2019. The state is talking about, they're predicting the future as vehicles turn more toward electric and other modes of fueling, that liquid fuels money is just going to continue to decrease, and they're talking about ways to maybe change the revenue source for that. No idea if that's ever going to happen or anytime soon. Key expenditures, we spent $1.94 million on the public works building in this quarter, $362,000 for storm pipe relining, $13,000 on tasers for the police, $8,000 on trench blocks for public works, $26,000 for Suburban Park Phase 1. I think that's design. $12,000 on playground equipment for Fairbrook. And if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Actually, before you do that, Eric, can I make just a couple of quick comments to supplement Eric's presentation? And we were just finishing up the slides a bit ago, so we'll make these available on the website as well, so that anybody can review them. But you know, this has been, as Eric pointed out, this is we really think is going to be a telling year for revenue collection, as you all know, and maybe some on the call do or don't, but we rely heavily on earned income tax for a majority of our revenue stream, which is really what all indicators are that was going to be the hardest hit by the pandemic, because they ebb and flow with the employment sector. All preliminary signs have been very strong, as Eric pointed out, but we do realize that it's a lagging indicator, and we're continuing to monitor, particularly over the first two quarters, this last one and the one that we're in now, as well as into the third and fourth quarter, quite frankly, what that projection looks like, because we're not confident that we're out of the woods yet with the impact that the pandemic may have had on our revenue collection and our sources of income. So we're going to, continue to monitor that. Expenditures, even on the expenditure side, because we have this bond issue tie things up, have also been a little bit difficult to be able to really accurately describe in a good way. But as Eric pointed out, I think the summary is that we're very much on budget on the expenditure side. We're projecting that we'll be, very close to our budgeted expenditures and across all funds. And then, of course, the stormwater fund, because it's sort of living in this, neutral area between a special revenue fund and a general fund, because of how we're supplementing it this year, is also not entirely the same depiction that you might see next year when Eric's making his first quarter financial report. So, we'll get these slides, we'll make them available to everybody, but there are some kind of skewed variables that have influenced how the report's been made to you this evening. Just want to kind of make that point clear. But Eric or I can answer any questions that the board might have, or anybody.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Eric. Board questions for Eric or Dave? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to our Public Works Week proclamation of 2021.
Thank you. Dave Modriker's on vacation, the Public Works Director, so I told him it was anybody's guess whether the board would adopt the proclamation in his absence. But I'll take a crack at introducing this one. And the board's done this over the last several years. We designate, typically it's a week in May, and this year's no exception, to be Public Works Week in Ferguson Township. This is a national initiative from the American Public Works Association. So municipalities that are members of that consortium all across the country are enacting similar proclamations. This year, it is May 16th to the 22nd. The theme this year, and they try to change this each year, is Stronger Together. And the intention is to challenge members of APWA in this case, and the residents of our communities to think about the role that public works plays in creating a great place to live. By working together, the impacts citizens and public works professionals can have on their communities is magnified and results in the ability to accomplish goals once thought unattainable. So the proclamation is provided with your agenda. If the board adopts it, we'll promote it on our webpage. And we usually do a few things throughout the week to express appreciation to our road workers and our public works staff.
Thank you, Dave. Could I take a motion, please?
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proclamation designating May 16th to May 22nd as 2021 Public Works Week in Ferguson Township.
This is
Same.
Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right. Thank you to Dave Modriker, and all of Public Works for all that they do for us, which is a lot. Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Next item is the 2021 Emergency Medical Services Week proclamation.
Thank you. I'll introduce this one too. This is a new proclamation that's presented to the board this evening, meaning we haven't done this in prior years. And the proclamation will be to designate, ironically, the same week, May 16th to May 22nd, to be 2021 Emergency Medical Services Week in Ferguson Township. The theme for the week this year is This is EMS, Caring for Our Communities, and it showcases an opportunity to recognize and acknowledge pre-hospital and hospital EMS practitioners for the many hours they spend preparing for and delivering care to the residents and visitors within our community. If we had a little more notice, there's a bunch of suggestions that are made on the website, hosting a blood drive, providing some kind of additional acknowledgement to our EMS workers. We'll be better prepared for this next year. We received the request from Seven Mountains EMS Consortium to designate this week. And so, next year, if we get this into the regular rotation, we can plan accordingly. But the proclamation is also provided with your agenda this evening, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dave. Questions? All right, I'd like to please ask for a motion.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proclamation designating May 16th to May 22nd as 2021 Emergency Medical Services Week in Ferguson Township.
Same, second.
Thank you. All right, any discussion? All right, obviously, many thanks to our EMS folks, many. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, unfinished business. We have a public hearing on an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 27 zoning, Part 3, residential plan development and mixed use, Section 304, terraced streetscape district by amending 27-304.3.b.2, building height incentives, and repealing it in its entirety. Jenna?
Thank you.
Thank you.
March 15th, 2021, the Board of Supervisors authorized staff to advertise public hearing to amend 273043B2. That is a typo in the agenda, but it is correct on the draft amendment. Building height incentives to remove it in its entirety. Provided with the agenda is the draft amendment as advertised to remove this provision of the Terrace Streetscape District Ordinance. While staff remains concerned about the implications of removing the incentive and is recommending that the board establish a minimum number of shared parking spaces to utilize the building height incentive, it is understood that incentives will be revisited with the pending TSD amendment. Therefore, staff is recommending adoption of the ordinance as presented. This amendment was provided to and reviewed by Center County Planning, Center Regional Planning Agency, and the Ferguson Township Planning Commission. Those reviews are provided with the agenda.
Thank you, Jenna. Any questions for Jenna before I take a motion? Oh, and is this a public hearing? Yes, it is. Okay, before I open it up to public comment, any questions? All right, let's open this up to public comment, please. It is a public hearing.
Here I am. Hi.
Hi.
Could you explain what this means as far as
Sure.
what actually is going to happen with parking and our buildings
Sure.
going to end up higher or lower or?
There was just one very specific, very narrow thing that this change does. And that is there was some language in the ordinance that was ambiguous. And so it said something to the effect of a extra height would be given on a building for folks that would provide shared parking. But it didn't specify what shared parking, how many spaces of shared parking, how that shared parking would be enforced, anything like that. So that would be considered a loophole where somebody could perhaps do a development and put one space of shared parking and get extra height on their building. That didn't meet the intent of the ordinance. So the board decided that we're just going to remove that. And the Planning Commission, like I said, is looking at the ordinance and they're going to make different recommendations on better, perhaps, incentives to provide shared parking, which is something that, as you know, parking could be an issue there. That's something that we would want to explore in a more precise way that would meet the intent of the ordinance.
So two questions.
Yeah.
One is what does shared parking mean? And the second one is, in the meantime, while you take this out before Planning Commission gets something in, what does that mean for the building that they're talking about putting on Buckout? Like, so there's no limit, or, what does that mean?
The progress of that particular plan submission is what alerted us to this particular loophole. So that's not our change now is not going to affect their utilization of that incentive. So they will be, yeah.
I'd heard that they're allowed to put another level on with just one parking space or something.
Is it one or three? But basically, yeah. So, and then shared parking, that's something we also explored. What exactly does that mean, shared parking? The intent would be for it to be, for you to come from somewhere, park there, go out and shop, go to maybe a cidery, whatever, in that TSD district, not just for a residence visitor or something like that. But how do you enforce that? So these are the kinds of questions that came up. Hopefully there's nothing else in that ordinance that would trigger our questions, and we can take our time now in working out those kinks before we put anything else into that ordinance. So Lisa.
I thought there were other requirements for them to do another level. I thought there were a couple other requirements as far as like lower cost housing or environmental considerations. I thought that was in the TSD district rules.
If I may, I think Jenna may be able to answer this
Yeah,
question.
I was gonna say, I think that's beyond my pay grade, maybe.
There are 4, I believe, building height incentives within Terrace Streetscape District. One was the shared parking, which we are removing. There's another one for sale workforce units. I believe in another section of the ordinance, there is an additional height if you have a roof garden. So it's all scattered throughout the ordinance. But I believe that the for sale workforce units and the shared parking provision is what allowed 20 feet of additional height.
So how many stories is that going to be? The one on top out?
The West College Student Housing Land Development Plan.
The one that's they're
is-
building, I don't know if they got approval or not yet. But
Yeah, they went through a preliminary review that is preliminarily approved. The final review of that will be coming up. I believe there are 5 floors of residential and there's a floor of commercial on the bottom. And it's not perfectly flat, so some of the subsurface parking comes up, but generally there will be commercial on the first floor, what a pedestrian would see, and then residential above.
is there enough parking there then for all the residents and their guests? Or are we going to be having it on the issue with parking on the streets, do you think?
Our ordinance requires parking for residents and for the commercial uses that are within the building. And that doesn't include visitors of the residents.
Okay.
So where are they supposed to park? That's what we get on Butt Street. We get a lot of visitors for the apartments down at the end of Gulfview. So, and sometimes they stay for quite a long time.
Yes, and I would say that the public hearing for this particular item is really very narrow, but these things that you're bringing up, definitely continue to bring them up in the planning commission and then through any process where we're working on amending, changing that TSD district generally.
So in the meantime, nobody can sneak something in, and when they
Yeah,
can
in
do
the
the other things. They can
meantime-
have a roof garden, but they won't be able to get it for the parking.
Right.
Right?
Not the one shared parking space, exactly, which is what this does. And Pam, I see your hand up. Pam Steckler. You're still muted though, Pam. There you go.
Sorry,
No, you're
I'm still a little weak on this stuff. I had a question about that as well. I hadn't realized that the preliminaries went okay with it. Is that what Jenna said?
Well, they met the conditions of our ordinance. So yes.
Okay.
The
my
incentive
quest-
was applied to the preliminarily approved land development plan.
Okay, my question is, it's not pertaining to the height or anything, but what about like crossings, street crossings? Did anything happen with that? Is there going to be a red light on College Avenue there?
There's
Well,
not, Pam, but I'll just, so this particular agenda item is really not about that land development plan. We just were alerted to this issue through reviewing that plan. But there's not going to be a red light there according to PennDOT. So, you know, I would say continue
Yikes.
to follow that plan. There'll be a review of the final plan. You'll get more information at that time, but you know, we have concerns too about people's safety. So we did voice them in that meeting. So we've done our best to handle that, and CAT is cooperating with what they can do. And so it is a PennDOT road though. So there's that.
So they have the final say as to whether or not you could. I mean, they have to putting a red light in. You can't just say in order for this to work, We need a red light.
All traffic signals, regardless of where they are, local roads, state roads, have to get PennDOT approval first. They need to be permitted by the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and they need to meet certain warrants in order to do so. For the land development plan that we've been talking about, that those warrants were not met.
So
Is it possible to do like a four-way stop there, or?
So it's not, but continue to come to our meetings when we're having the conversation about that zoning district, Pam, because we look forward to your input. Generally.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I know it was kind of off topic, but I was.
It's okay. I know how to wrangle you in. Okay. So any other public comment on the removal of the height incentive for shared parking in the TSD? Okay, seeing no further public comment, I'll close the public hearing and move on to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on this item? Steve?
I'll just add my comment that I made before is opposed to the, I recognize that this is a very specific circumstance for a particular reason, but I'm opposed to piecemeal changes in the zoning ordinances instead of a holistic look at it. So I will vote against the motion, and that's the reason. So.
Okay, Steve, thank you for letting us know. Anybody else? Lisa?
I understand Steve's point, but I think this is exactly when you'd want to take an immediate action on something when you see the kind of problems that can result. And it's just so unfortunate we didn't see this before and could have increased the number of essentially public parking in that building or had less height in it. So lose, you know, so I think this is exactly the circumstance that you'd want to take that kind of action. But yes, I think we should look at this. And I had a comment to Rhonda and Pam. So I don't know, you know, I guess I would just say to follow along with that land development plan, because I know you both have concerns with that. So, you know, if you had specific questions or issues before it comes up in front of the board again, please, you know, let one of us know or staff so that we can follow up with you and be happy to talk about that. So
Thank you very much. And Prasenjit?
Yeah, I wanted to, you know, ask a question to whoever, maybe Dave, or if the chief is here. I've heard about the parking, and I honestly, I mean, I haven't driven through that or gone through that area when there is like, you know, high parking demand. And also I understand that what is going to happen when a huge building goes up will be different. Having said that, is there a problem there now? I mean, yeah, people are not obeying the 2-hour thing. And yes, we should, in principle, enforce all ordinances and so on, but there is some amount of prosecutorial discretion there. And if there is not a nuisance, then perhaps it doesn't rise to that high a level in my eyes at this point, acknowledging very well that things could change when a huge building comes in. Now, so I wanted to find out if there is an issue right now. I mean, even if a car is sitting there for 2 days, is there a real traffic hazard that's happened there? Have there been accidents or incidents there? Do we have any data?
So accidents or incidents I can follow up on. I can see if the chief, I know that we've looked at this data very recently. So, you know, we'd have some data on hand. There have been incidents out there. I think the short answer to your question, Mr. Mitra, is yes, it's a problem. It's a problem both in current conditions out there, meaning, and I think what we heard from some of the residents that spoke tonight, there are times where on-street parking really can become problematic and really is overwhelming and, blocks access or whatever. Oftentimes, as I understand it, when we've had to really be aggressive in enforcement, it's because there have been vehicles that have been left there for, and this is a general statement to all of the kind of smaller streets in the TSD, have been left there for long periods of time, unattended. Or perhaps they're blocking the cartway and they become an impediment in that respect. But it's also a forward-thinking problem in the sense that, over the years, I can say just in the 8 years that I've been here, 9 years or so, we've looked at this district a couple of times, never proceeded with any, substantial amendments, but parking has always been among the top 3 issues and impediments, if you will, to really seeing development in that corridor. Parking is handled a little bit differently there, as you saw from what's kind of germane to this discussion, than it is in any of our other zoning districts. That was partly to be more reflective of its mixed use nature and the intent to have kind of at least what at the time we were visualizing as a terrace streetscape district. But yeah, there are problems tied to the parking that relate to existing conditions, future conditions, these sort of nuances in the ordinance. It's a bear. But to your point, I think you're right. In the way, I like the way you put it as prosecutorial discretion. I think, we try to address aggressively the real issues, the public safety hazards, blocking the cartways, impediments, things like that. And we have worked with property owners in many cases to just resolve the ones that are not quite as impactful or perhaps don't pose that same immediate threat. So, we always try to work with property owners when it's not something that's an imminent problem, but there have been substantial problems where we had to take it in tow and et cetera. So I can get some more specifics though and share them out with the board.
No, thank you. This is very important in deciding which way I vote. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for addressing that. Do any other board members have anything that they want to speak to? And then I just want to briefly, so this topic, we've kind of talked about 3 things. So we've talked about general changes to the TSD. We've talked about this specific change to the TSD, and then we've talked about the student housing development within the TSD district. And so just before we move into any further discussion or the vote, this specific amendment is to just remove, for the time being, the shared parking for height incentive that is currently in our TSD ordinance. Does any other board member have anything that they want to discuss or questions? Prasenjit.
Yeah, so quick follow-up. So what I'm thinking is the real impact then is that if we remove it and do not replace it with something else, then the one parking that we were getting now becomes 0 and they don't get the height either. So is it,
right?
I'm thinking whether it doesn't become a lose-lose proposition for both parties in some sense.
I see. Well, the reason I think that so I typically don't mind height. And when we're looking at the TTD over off of Blue Course, I was saying, look, if we're doing a traditional town or, an urban center, let's go ahead and do that height. But here in the TSD, we've got a neighborhood abutting it that doesn't really want that height. So we're kind of trying to, like we did in the fire ordinance, kind of please both parties so we don't have a canyon, like a weird 1 8-story tower strip and then houses like basically right beside it. So the idea of providing additional height without receiving any kind of a benefit for the community, it doesn't work as well in this particular context. that's at least
No,
how
got
I'm
it.
approaching that.
No, thank
So-
you. I wasn't thinking it that way. That's
Sure.
Thank you.
It's a lot. I mean, that's why everybody is right that spoke here. Like Steve and Lisa, they're both right. You know, we really shouldn't pick apart things in a piecemeal manner, but that just seemed so kind of contrary to what we're trying to do there. So, and I think it's all in all, it's a good thing because it did re-inspire us to look at the TSD. We were going to look at it and then we weren't going to look at it. And now we're going to like look at it, pre-look at it. So I don't know. I think all in all, it's a win all the way around. I guess too bad we couldn't have learned it before it was actually applied in the real world, but that's how it goes sometimes. All right, with that, I will ask for a motion. There is one available on the agenda if you should choose to use it.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 27, Section 304, 3B.2, building height incentives by repealing it in its entirety.
This is Patty. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Dave, is this a roll call?
Yes.
Okay,
This is presented as ordinance number 1070. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Denini,
yes.
Mr. Miller,
No.
Mr. Mitra.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That passes 4-1. And we shall move on to our new business. First up is the consent agenda. We've got a sponsorship request for the Ferguson Township Elementary PTO, Harner 4-lot subdivision surety reduction, a board member request, voucher report, and treasurer's report. So I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda and accept the treasurer's report.
Yeah, I present move that we accept the treasurer's report and move the consent agenda.
This is Patty. I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next up is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the disposition of specific public records in accordance with the procedures set forth in the retention and disposition schedule for records of Pennsylvania municipalities issued July 16th, 1993, and is amended December 16th, 2008. Dave?
Thank you. So provided with the agenda is the resolution that was been advertised for public hearing. As Ms. Denini pointed out, it includes the schedule of disposition in accordance with the records retention and disposition schedule for Pennsylvania municipalities. This is typically an annual exercise of the township. We did miss last year because of COVID. It was just an oversight. So this year we're doing kind of 2 years of disposition, both years 2019 and 2020. There's the schedule that's in your resolution in the agenda packet, identified as Exhibit A. There's a brief description of the contents of the storage boxes that are presented for disposition. And there's a recommended motion in the agenda. Staff is recommending adoption of the resolution.
Thank you, Dave. This is a public hearing. Would anyone in the public like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution authorizing the disposition of specific public records in accordance with the retention and disposition schedule for records of Pennsylvania municipalities.
Present second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. Dave, roll call vote. Thank you.
This is presented as Resolution 2021-19. Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Denini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Well, moving on, we'll go to a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending resolutions 1999-36, 2000-22 and 2020-41, the official township plant list. Dave Probalka.
Thank you. So again, provided with your agenda is a copy of the resolution that's been advertised for public hearing. It does amend the resolution that identifies the official township plant list. This is the guidance document that we use internally for certain projects, but it's also the guidance document that we apply to land development plans and subdivision plans where landscaping is a component in order to determine what approved species are allowed to be, species the right word? What approved kinds of plants are allowed to be permitted to be planted in the township. Really, the singular focus of this amendment is to add Salix discolor or native pussy willow to the official township plant list. It was reviewed and recommended for approval by the Tree Commission on April 19th, and staff is recommending the same.
That's great. And this is a public hearing. Let's open it up to anyone in the public that would like to comment. All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and I will entertain a motion.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution amending the official township plant list.
Sanjit, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? This is
say-
exciting. Thank you to the
I
Tree
like the
Commission.
change. I like the change because they're a really nice bush, so.
Yeah, I love them. That's great. It was sad to see them missing. I'm glad they made the change. Okay, Dave, looks like it's roll call again.
This is presented as resolution 2021-20. Ms. Danini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland.
Yes.
All right, thank you all. Next up is a request for zoning variance at 310 Marengo Lane, 24-006A 081-0. Jenna Wargo.
Thank you. Zachary Macer at 310 Marengo Lane, zone single family residential, is requesting a variance from 27701-3C1 use limitations and 27701-3I use buffer to allow for the applicant to repair and pave the existing driveway that is located in the floodplain. Staff's recommendations that the Board of Supervisors remain neutral on the request for the variances.
All right. Any questions for Jenna? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that the board remain neutral on the application.
Sanjit, second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. And next up, we have staff and committee reports. First, our COG committee reports, and executive committee is up first. I attended the executive committee prior to the general forum meeting, and so I really don't have much to report on that. I guess any questions? All right. Next up, CCMPO Coordinating Committee, Lisa.
Thanks. The agenda's in the packet and had a lot of information, so I'm not going to go over too much of it except to just say, if you look at it, you'll see that intersection route of Route 26 and Route 45 was the first item on the agenda. And what it was really just some shifting of funding. That project needed a little bit more funds, and some additional federal funding became available that could be applied to some different projects. So some funding was shifted around, and we had to amend the budget for that, so that was taken care of. So there wasn't it wasn't about any change to the project itself, just some minor funding changes. And I wanted to point out that there is a safety subcommittee that's made up by some technical committee folks. And so they've met once or twice, and one interesting thing that's come out of their discussions is they've come up with a top 10 of intersections of concern. And so they're going to be coming back to the coordinating committee with some more details on that, probably at our June meeting. And so that'll be interesting to see it. Again, this is countywide, so so it'll maybe a Ferguson Township intersection in there, maybe not. So we'll see what they identified. And then our next meeting is scheduled for June 22nd, but we may have a meeting in May. PennDOT did a Pell study which they usually do on road projects, but they did this particular study to figure out how to increase their funding because there's a real funding crisis. So they've looked at a number of different strategies, and so they've come out with a report, and the public comment period is open now. The coordinating committee may want to make comments on that. So we may meet in May to discuss the study and forward some comments back to PennDOT on that. So so if we have a May meeting, I can report on that following that.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? Okay, do we have any other committee reports? All right, seeing none, let's move on to our staff reports. Dave, you're up.
Generally the report is in the packet, as is for the planning director and the public works director. I can answer any questions. Jenna's on here if the board has any questions on the planning report as well. The only item of note, and given that we're kind of early today, I'll just mention Lance King is our township arborist. He is leaving the employment with the township. He's actually accepted the State College Borough arborist vacancy. So his last day is May 7th. We're going to work to at least fill in, find a fill-in on a part-time basis until we can get a little bit better handle on things and decide whether to move forward with a full-time hire. But that's it. Everything else is just there in writing. I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Dave. I saw there was some question of maybe enlarging the dog park at Two Deck Park.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume then, speaking of all the partners in Park and Rec, I would assume then that Center Region Park and Rec has been involved in those discussions.
Yeah, in fact, they initiated them.
Oh, okay.
Part of the, and this is not happening this year. So if there's any dog park attendees on the call,
don't get excited.
Just yet. Yeah, actually the master plan calls for a fourth large dog enclosure. Typically what Park and Rec does is try to reseed one enclosure and close the other one. So they try to kind of alternate back and forth. And of course, 3 being an odd number, sometimes that can be a little difficult. So the proposal would be to add a fourth pen with a small pavilion area and a water source. But you know, again, it was just very preliminary that we talked about this with the Two Deck trustees. You know, to Ms. Dennett's point, it's another hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, of our regional park network, the Tom Two Deck Memorial Park trustees. I serve on that group as a township manager, along with 4 others. And then there's an emeritus position that we created for Mark Kunkel because of all of his institutional knowledge. So he serves as a non-voting member on that group too. So it's really just to talk about the process to move forward. If we are taking the next steps, it would be to involve a landscape architect, which we happen to have on the trustees, Dan Jones, who's a retired or professor emeritus in landscape architecture from Penn State, and start to kind of put some final touches on the design. It's a really weird caveat that was thrown in our way, which is, I'll just mention because it's kind of—
It's too weird not to? Go for it, yes.
Not to. There used to be, long before my time here, maybe some of you who have been here for a long time may recall, a cattle barn there. And it was like it was a concrete structure or something like that. And it was buried right there where it sits. So, you know, that point was brought up, which I was completely unaware of. So who knows if it's even feasible for us to do. We'd have to first do some preliminary assessments to see how deep it is, whether we can excavate there, what kind of site work. So, you know, nothing's easy, but nothing worth doing is easy either. So we'll keep pressing on.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to updates on the buried barn situation.
Sure. Yeah.
So. All right, thank you. Next up, Dave Modricker with Public Works Director's Report. He's not there. Anything that you would like to point out, Dave Prabalka?
No, it's pretty standard. Unless there's any questions, I can try or I can get responses back.
Okay, we had some nice coverage of the Public Works building ribbon cutting. So, yeah, and then Dave was like, "I'm going on vacation now. I got to get out of here." All right, Planning and Zoning Director, Jenna.
My report's included in the agenda packet. Planning Commission will be meeting May 10th. We're reviewing a conditional use application that the board will be seeing on the 17th. Otherwise, we already discussed the hearing board. That would be a new one. And a couple new subdivisions that we're still waiting to hear back from engineers on staff's comments.
Any questions for Jenna? All right, next up is communications to the board. Anything that the board would like to report? Okay, looks like it was a quiet couple of weeks. Calendar items for May. We've got all of our upcoming meetings listed, and I really just still love that addition to our agenda. And thank you again, Faith, for that suggestion. And then next up is adjournment. So if we're ready to adjourn, I'll take a motion.
I do have a point of order
Okay.
on the adjournment. Doesn't our home rule charter keep us from adjourning before 9 o'clock?
I knew where you were going
Yeah,
with
I
that.
think 9 o'clock is absurdly early, so this is 8:33, so.
Well, we could probably talk about the TSD till 9 if you want to, so.
Shut up, Steve.
Well, now when I will make a motion to adjourn.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.